Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the last Citizen A for 2010, where we wrap the year's political events from a very Auckland perspective and make predictions for the 2011 election. Warning, risk fair and bounces Fox News. Joining me tonight, I'm a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. Here's the liberal lion of the left, blogger, author and political folk singer. His Molotov cocktails are made with Galbraith's home brew. Life member of the Socialist Council of Wise Ents, Comrade Chris Trotter. And he is to rational debate what drinking is to driving. He can charm the pants back onto a prostitute. The unsuppressible Darth Vader of the right-wing blogosphere, Cameron Slater, aka Whale Oil. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, what were the political highlights of 2010 from Best Minister through to Worst MP? And what does the economic and political future of the 2011 election hold in store? Let's kick things off with Best Minister. This year, my pick is Tony Ryle for making health disappear like David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear. Wherever he is hiding health, he seems to have been kidnapping Ruth Dyson as well, because she's been pretty crap. Best Minister, Chris, and why?
Well, I'm going to dispute your choice of Ryle. I think the best minister, without any doubt, has been Stephen Joyce.
Why?
Stephen Joyce is a natural politician. He's come to quite high office on his first go.
Yeah.
And he is very, very relaxed in front of the camera. He's very relaxed in front of any kind of microphone. And he has a knack of not taking criticism or hard questions personally and getting defensive, but of, doing the unthinkable, actually answering them.
But he's well researched as well, isn't he? And
well,
so
he's a
if
bright
he does
guy.
get a hard question, he's generally got an answer.
And he clearly works well with his advisors, although he's not, in my opinion anyway, slave to them.
Which is good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he told me a great story shortly after he was appointed minister, of having all his advisors in. They were all yes minister this and yes minister that, and then they broke and everyone went out to get a cup of tea, and of course all the mandarins were saying, well, he'll probably scrub up quite nice. Oh, I'm not sure about. And he had just quietly gone out and was standing behind them, just standing there listening.
Oh, beautiful.
Which I thought,
beautiful.
Talk about wrong footing these guys from day one. I bet they've been eating out of his hand ever since.
Best Minister, Cam, and why?
I do agree on Tony Ryle, but I'd also add in there Judith Collins as well.
You think?
Well, she's solved a lot of problems in police, a lot of problems in corrections. Well, she's getting rid of Howard for a start. He was a woeful police commissioner. From all accounts, from the guys on the ground, they're very happy with the new appointment. Corrections hasn't had too many problems come up, but also she stepped in and saved Finlayson in his conflict issues, and also sorted out a few issues in Simon Power's own portfolio as well, where he should have been on top of. And contrary to one or two media people pushing Fig Jam's agenda, he is not the person that he likes to make out that he is. So she stepped in there. Tony Ryle, of course, he stepped in. Not only did he hose down health, there's really not a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that Tony Ryle did was take over from Tolly when she was overseas and absolutely slaughtered the principals. And that was his doing. And for that reason, for nullifying that political nightmare for Tolly, then he has to get that Best Minister in my book as well.
My pick for Worst Minister is Kate Wilkinson, as she is never listened to by the boys. She may as well have Paul Henry as a career advisor. Worst Minister, and why, Chris?
I don't think there's any doubt that Anne Tolley deserves that accolade, if accolade it is. Person less qualified and obviously less committed
and out of her
to education. Yeah, it would be hard to imagine.
She's annoyed literally everyone in education.
I'm not quite sure why she was appointed, whether it was some attempt to give some gender balance to what was a pretty blokey cabinet lineup. But along with Wilkinson, she doesn't have the pull necessary, to make that portfolio work. And I'm just at a loss to understand the whole national
There's a whole lot of better ministers than Anne Tolley and Kate Wilkinson.
Oh, absolutely.
She seems to have gotten offside with literally every single person in education and ramming policy that the teachers don't want through. It's not going to work, is it?
Well, the teachers are never going to be happy, though, are they?
Yeah, that given though.
Well,
you're
with
never
a
going to be able
national
to
government.
remember.
Well,
Ever.
the interesting thing is that the parents of primary school age kids are now getting the reports.
Yeah.
And they're seeing what this national standards thing is all about.
Yeah, it's great.
And how it differs from the reports they've had in the past. And, you know, the general reaction, there's been no, you know, scientific polling done, but, you know, the anecdotal evidence certainly suggests that parents are not exactly, you know, antagonistic towards it, but are just befuddled. They can't work out what on earth this has all been about. If this is what it looks like, it's certainly no better, and possibly worse than what preceded it.
But it's backfired, certainly. That, I mean, I got my own daughter's report. She's in the intermediate level, so it's still come, and we've got the you know, the national standards, and you know, I'm wondering what the teachers were so upset about.
Because it's going to be used as a league table. It's league table by stealth. That's what this has been about from day one, these national standards. And that's been the resistance.
But what's the problem with that?
Because if you by implementing false competition within the education model,
we're working in the
get
media
competition
industry, right? We're rated on the results and audience.
Poorly rated,
right? But we're rated nonetheless on our performance. Why can't that apply to teachers?
Because
you
want to take this one?
No.
Yeah, I mean, your children's education is possibly more important than where a private sector or even a state-owned public broadcaster's ratings happen to be at any particular time in the year. The moment you have published league tables, as they have in Great Britain, two things happen.
We haven't got them at the moment.
Yet.
I know. But it certainly looks as though that is where national standards are headed, and that, I think, really is what underpins the teachers' opposition.
Yeah.
But, you know, the experience in the UK is quite clear. First of all, you start getting a kind of solidification of social divisions based on access to differing kinds of schools, whether they're high raters or low raters. And secondly, and much worse, teachers start teaching solely to the tests, because that is the only way they get the resources. That's the only way they attract the better kind of
worst
parents.
minister and why? Worst minister and why?
Simon Power is
Why?
my worst
Why?
minister. Well, for a start, he did a deal behind the backs of his own caucus over electoral finance with the Labour Party.
Great thing, great cooperation.
It's not about cooperation. It's about standing up for your principles, and he doesn't have any.
Well, he does, but he doesn't want the rich buying the election.
But we've proved that with Len Brown, that the rich don't buy elections.
No, it just means John Banks can't buy one. That's what that means. That's all that means.
He deals with the opposition behind his own caucus's back.
Bridge builder.
He's stupidly, in the wake of WikiLeaks, still trying to think that he can control the internet.
So this is your personal beef with him because he had to go at you and cost you
he
10 grand.
lied in his press release about what he was going to make changes to around name suppression, and the law changes that he's put through bear zero resemblance to his press releases.
So
What he's doing is he's pretending that he's a minister who's listening and doing things, yet he's allowing his officials and his flunkies in his office to control and do the work for him, while he's trying to take all the kudos. And then the last part of that is that he's simply hated by caucus and sits there and scotches any sort of on board appointments or on honours lists or anything like that. You know, one thing the Labour Party does really, really well is it looks after its supporters. And Simon Power craps all over his supporters, and for that reason, I have to give him the worst minister.
Aren't there better reasons to rate him
This
as
is
the
personal.
worst? But exactly, the better reasons being his.
At least I'm honest about it, right?
Hey, it's all personal. I'm with Cameron in that regard. Ultimately, if you're a commentator, and I would argue too, a journalist, there's more personal animosity involved in what people write than
actual
than many readers
and they
might like to.
I'm prepared to wear that on my sleeve.
His conveyor belt of cheap justice, which will become a black hole that will suck people in. That's the problem.
It's not addressing the
That's
issues.
the reason to be unhappy with him. Best thing this government did was, for the benefit of the 650 millionaires they gave $1,000 tax cuts to since October. Thank God the Sam Morgans of New Zealand are doing well. Chris, best thing this government did this year?
Well, it's only just done it, in my view, and that's prevented the sale of the crayfish farms to the Chinese. Not that I've got anything deeply ingrained in terms of foreign investment.
They should have had a French woman fronting it.
Well, they should have had someone who wasn't about to be declared a bankrupt.
That's right. That didn't help.
That might have been a good start.
Yeah.
But land, I think.
Well, that's Maurice Williamson.
Land has a different character to some business somewhere, which may, go into American or Australian hands. There was a lovely cartoon, a sleighing cartoon, I think, in The Listener, which really summed up why land is so important. It was set obviously back in the 18th century, had a couple of Maori chiefs on the beach and a little rowboat heading back to the sailing ship. And one of the chiefs was saying to the other, "No, it's a good deal. I mean, it's not as if they can take the land with them." And I thought, well, yeah, that's why land is really important.
That's true. You can't roll up the farmland and take it to China.
Best thing this government did, Cam. You must have thousands of things. Thousands of things.
No, I'm not an apologist for the government. Let me tell you.
Really?
And all of the things that I.
Your name's not David Farrar. Okay.
No, I'm not the one who's getting large sums of money for doing polling for the government.
Which are ridiculous. Yes.
Anyway, I've got a blank on this.
Yep.
I couldn't think of a single best thing that the government did. And that is appalling with a mandate that they had winning the election, a mandate for change.
For change, but ill-defined change.
If you look at we're just starting to see the fruits of decades and decades of not fixing the issues, and we had this discussion on Friday night, not fixing the issues in welfare. We are reaping the destruction now, in seeing that in the headlines of kids that are being bashed and killed, and
more money for SIFs. I'm glad to hear that. The worst thing this government did.
No, money is not the problem in SIFs. Actually,
money is the problem.
The problem in SIFs is the problem that cannot speak its name.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The worst thing this government did was allow the private prison industry to come in and warp social policy as important as imprisonment for their profit margin gain, which is made more offensive by the fact that the private prison industry actually told the Select Committee that they wouldn't be cheaper, something the mainstream media always ignore. Chris, what was the worst thing this government did and why?
Well, I mean, it's a tie for me. I think in a strictly constitutionalist sense, SKLEE was an abomination.
Yes.
This was the Canterbury earthquake recovery and something else act. Well, yeah, I mean, that was the general response from the government's defenders. Oh, look, you're a bunch of academics and you're worried about nothing, and Jerry Brownlee's a man we can trust.
Outrageous, though, isn't it?
No, I trust his ineptitude is what I trust.
Too many cock-ups, not enough conspiracies.
That's right. Too many cock-ups, not enough conspiracies.
But really, parliamentarians should have more regard for their own role in our democracy and for the traditions upon which our democracy is founded. And I sadly have to say that I agree with Cameron on that. They either don't understand it, they don't have the grasp of the history from which our parliament flows and how important it is to defend the rights of Parliament vis-a-vis the executive. I mean, people died in large numbers.
Yes, to fight for that.
That's one thing you've always grasped is that wars formed this country through freedoms. I've got a deeply cynical point of view on politicians. It goes back to when I was very, very young. Now, I can remember an MP having an argument with my mother around the dinner table when she was remonstrating with him about, how you said you were going to do this, and when you got to Parliament, you did completely the opposite. And his answer, and it's stuck deeply within me, and I've remembered it to this day, was, look, Margaret, it doesn't matter what we said during the election. When we get to Wellington, we do whatever we please.
Oh, that's pleasing.
Right?
What was
now, I remember that, and that was where my cynicism for politicians was deeply embedded.
I always thought very highly of Steve Mahari until he uttered those immortal words. It's just one of those things you say in opposition, but forget about when you're in government.
What was the worst thing his government did?
Selling out via Simon Power on the electoral finance reform.
Oh, you love that,
I forgot to give the other winner, which was the way they treated the whole Hobbit issue.
Oh, wasn't the manufacturing
and
prices
isn't it lovely to see it all unfolding now?
Isn't it? Yeah, we had
it might be
that
lovely,
last
but
week.
everyone's at the barbecues and they've forgotten about it.
Oh, they'll remember it next year. I'll make sure.
Sadly, I fear that Cameron is right. I mean, it's always the case, as anyone who's ever been in journalism knows, that the accusations
5 weeks is a long time.
The accusations on the front page, the corrections on page 22.
Worst things government did?
I've said
Yep.
Simon Power doing a backroom deal with Labour. There was a lot of people that marched down the streets.
A lot of rich white people angry that they couldn't buy an election. Yes.
You were there, Bob.
I was there for the first one.
You were there.
I was there for the
You
first
were
one,
there.
but then I
You
went
marched.
off. Then I went off.
You
Yeah, I was there.
marched.
No, look, and I must say,
got you on video.
on this issue, I mean, I'm slowly coming round, and it's largely because, all due credit to your good self, Cameron, it's largely because of Bryce Edwards from the Liberation blog.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because he has got the data
Yeah.
that shows that
Money doesn't
it's
buy
counterintuitive, I know, but money doesn't
It doesn't
necessarily
it's not proven
buy you victory.
anywhere in the world.
And the latest example, the one that really made me think, was the I think it was the senatorial battle
Yes.
in California,
Yep.
where this multi-millionaire
Huge
woman
amounts of
was
money.
running against, was it a boxer?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she just poured millions,
But-
all her own money,
Look, politics-
and she still lost.
Politics for me is visceral. It's in the guts. I think you'd agree with that. We've got far too many politicians that get into Parliament and they've studied politics and they've got politics degrees, and the end result is they actually know nothing about politics, and it's in the guts. And if you have a message, then it needs to be simple and it needs to be repeated over and over again. And that is where Labour is falling down, is they're not keeping their messages simple.
The best thing the opposition did was Labour suddenly waking up to the fact that they were a left-wing party after 25 years by challenging some of the right-wing economic principles that underline the country. What was the best thing the opposition did this year?
You've taken the words right out of my mouth and off my cheat sheet.
Yeah.
I was going to say also that the Labour Party's willingness now to slay some sacred cows in terms of economic
And then
policy.
David Cunliffe spiked it all by talking about...
Although that was badly presented, but
Yes.
if you actually
He did it during
read,
the Pike River crisis.
if you read the speech, you find
doesn't
that
say
it's
that.
not
Yeah.
as bad as
Yeah.
it looks.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was great.
yes, I'm sure you
So
did.
you did.
But no, Labour reclaiming some semblance of its social democratic
But
identity.
it doesn't resonate, though. That's the problem.
Not yet. Not yet. I agree.
Best thing the opposition did?
Well, the best thing they did for National was keep Phil Goff as leader.
I knew you were going to say that.
You know, they've had a lot of complex stories or policies that they've tried to expand. It just isn't resonating because, and the WikiLeaks cables show that, Labour still thinks that it was all a terrible mistake that they were tossed from power. They think they've got that arrogance that National had in 2002, that it'll all be put right at the next election, and it just won't. Their arguments don't resonate, and it's all well and good for Phil Goff to sit there and smile, and he's got his new walk, and he's got all of those things going, and talk about social democracy, but the man actually doesn't believe it, and it shows.
Well, when the economy turns, we'll see. The worst thing the opposition did was agree to effectively put Parliament on hold and give Jerry Brownlee the powers of God after the earthquake. Worst thing the opposition did...
You're reading my cheat.
That's it?
No, I'd have to agree that. I mean, and I would say the same of the Greens too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just
The who?
egregious.
Yes.
Yeah, well, good point. We'll come to that later.
Yeah.
But for the Labour Party to go along with that, for any MP,
Yep.
I don't care what party they were in. But you know, the two who really, I think, ideologically had most reason not to vote for it, ACT and the Greens, were just as bad. So,
Yep,
you know,
yep.
but Labour had more responsibility
Worst thing
being the
opposition
larger
did?
party.
The worst thing the opposition has done is mount endless campaigns on the taxpayers' money that are far too complex, that actually don't make sense, when what they really need to be saying, and the only person who's picked up on this is Trevor Mallard,
Yep.
all they need to do is run a very simple campaign saying, are you better off now than you were under Labour?
Under National.
And no,
under
Labour.
Right.
Right. You've had 3 years now of National. Are you any better off?
Yeah,
That's all they need to say, and say it over and over and over and over and
right,
over
you're
again.
right, you're right.
But no, what they want to do is tell lies like AXA tax. They want to muddy GST. They want to just do a whole lot of just weird stuff that doesn't resonate. People don't believe them.
We're going to move on because we're running out of time. Best minor party.
Oh, I'm going to enrage Cameron now
Yes.
by saying I think the best performance by a minor party has been that of New Zealand First.
Let's hear it.
And that's because
Through obscurity.
under the radar,
Yep.
under the media's eyes, and really without much attention being paid to him, or except quite recently, Winston's been out rebuilding his party. He's been attracting hundreds of people
Yes.
to meetings, and this is what
Good cold winter will sort that out.
this is you're a wicked man. This is what really flabbergasted me. I mean, they are starting to form university branches.
Yes.
And this
That's
struck
for the returning adult
this
students, though,
struck
isn't it?
me as really
Well, for them.
interesting. It's not. I mean,
It's for
I'm
the
sure there
60
are
to
some,
80s.
but there is a hunger among young New Zealanders for something other than what they have grown up with,
Yep.
which clearly isn't working.
Yeah,
Well, Labour
Certainly
and
not
National
working
don't
for
believe
them.
in anything, do they?
And that is why I think Winston has done so well. Why the party seems in such good heart. I've been to a couple of meetings just to see whether there is anything below
As long as they keep
Winston.
them off TV, they might have a chance.
Best minor party. Best minor party.
I say the Maori Party
Yep.
is the best minor party, and not for the reasons that you're thinking, but because they've delivered to the people who matter the most to them, and that's the Maori elite,
Yep.
the bureaucracy.
Yep.
Through Whānau It's
Yep.
poured millions and millions of dollars into their pockets,
Yep.
and they've done it all by pretending that it's good for the peasants.
Worst party and why? Worst minor party?
Well, I've got the Greens.
Yep.
And the reason,
So do I.
the reason I've got the Greens is because they seem to have emptied themselves of everything that made them worth voting
Yep.
for. It's weird. There's a kind of
More lime now than green.
Well,
isn't it?
that's right. There's a kind of double motion going on here because as they've emptied themselves out of all that energy and idealism that they had back in '99, they've become commensurately more sophisticated. I mean, their production of propaganda is vastly superior to what they used to turn out. I mean, they've become a more professional party, but in becoming a more
But distance
professional
themselves
party,
from the grassroots.
yeah, they have become less and less a true Green party.
Best MP and worst MP.
Well, I was just going to mention about the Greens, and agree with you on that one, in that they've become obscure. Labour made them obscure by never bringing them into a coalition.
And they've done it on
And
their
they
own.
sucked it up and sucked it up and sucked it up, and now under National, they're even more obscure. And it's clear too that the Ginger and Australian quota project hasn't worked.
Best MP, worst MP.
Best MP's a real struggle, but I have to give some credit to Trevor Mallard. He has been giving Antolli a right good slapping.
Yep.
And he's made some sensible suggestions, even if Antolli didn't take them up, despite there being an agreement to take them up. And I think the hand of Simon Power is again in there. Trevor Mallard wanted the Teachers' Council to have their deliberations published and open. Unfortunately, we've still got secrecy and name suppression over pedos and that are remaining as teachers.
Worst MP?
Well, it has to be Ashraf Chowdhury.
Yep. Best MP, worst MP.
For my money, the best MP is Phil Twyford.
Yep.
And I say that not only because he has
Because he's-
finally secured
because
the
he's-
seat
Finally!
He's no longer the opposition spokesman for homeless.
for the homeless, but also for the work he did on the Super City.
But none of that's come to fruition.
Which
or
I
the scare
think,
tactic.
which I think was very, very important in laying a kind of foundation for the campaign which Len Brown then ran.
And worst? Worst MP?
Oh, Paul Quinn. Just a man who should never ever darken
Chowdhury.
Parliament's
It has to be
precincts.
Ashraf Chowdhury.
Thank you, panel. Coming up, crystal ball time. What are the political predictions for the 2011 elections? Citizen A is back after the break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last Citizen A for 2010, and we're making predictions for 2011 with right-wing storm blogger Cameron Slater and political commentator Chris Stratos. The economy. What will happen domestically and internationally? Domestically with NZIER warning about a double dip, house prices falling, high unemployment, and retail looking very shaky. How will the domestic economy fare, Chris Stratos?
Oh, I think we're not in so much a double dip as a flatline situation. I think the New Zealand economy is just going to bump along the bottom for most of 2011. I think that the government's books are in a parlous state, and there will be in the budget that word austerity, and that will become, in a sense, the buzzword for New Zealand in 2011, as it's been the buzzword in Great Britain throughout 2010.
I agree with Chris on that, and austerity is something that really the government should have done earlier on this term, and it probably might have actually had an effect. It's too late now for 2011. But the alternative, and this is where I guess the government has snookered Labour, is Labour's alternative is to spend even more money, and it's money we don't have. So, that's not going to resonate. When people are struggling to pay bills, and they see the government is struggling to pay bills, the answer isn't borrow more money. You can't do it in your home, you can't do it as a government.
Although thank God Cullen during the good years paid down our debt so that we can. That's great. Internationally, what will we see? China property market bubble, sovereign debt collapse, banking crisis, or euro disintegration? Pick a tumour that will become a cancer.
All of those.
Well, yes, the easy answer is all of the above. I mean, I think China is the one to watch. The Chinese economy is all that's holding the planet's economy up at the moment, and if that should falter, if that should falter, then we're in real trouble.
Except they've got all the world's money.
Well, they've got a whole lot of American dollars, which may or may not be a good thing for the Chinese. We shall see.
Well, they can give it to Fiji and other countries in the Pacific.
How does the government sell the 2011 privatisation agenda?
What privatisation?
Fake.
Is that how they do it?
Fake fiscal crisis.
Right,
fake fiscal crisis.
So we do it that way, do we?
Yeah. Well, you look at it. There's a whole lot of non-core businesses.
Just stuff we can sell off.
I'll give you an example. VTNZ.
Very important.
Right, they're competing with local garages for warrant
Great job.
Why does the government own a testing station?
Just
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we rationalise it. Okay.
Yes.
How does the government sell the deep welfare cuts?
Oh, dependency kills.
Dependency
kills.
The very thing that Cameron was saying earlier. That's the rhetoric that will work. They will link failures and SIFs, which have absolutely nothing to do with our welfare system, with the terrible stories that we're coming out, and that will be the rationale that if we want this sort of terrible headline to disappear, then we have to reform the welfare system rather than actually get some social workers who know what they're doing in SIFs.
That's right. How do we sell deep welfare cuts?
Well, again, Chris is right and he's wrong, but money is not the solution that we have in welfare. Everyone thinks give more money, it'll make the problem go away. Well, we've been doing that for how long? 50 years? The problems are still there. We had 9 years of a Labour government, and the people who were on welfare at the start of that 9 years were still on it at the end of it. And their lives weren't any better.
Yeah, but you've got to be clear about who you...
When I say welfare,
who you're speaking of, because most people come in and leave welfare in a relatively short period of time. So we're not actually talking about the same people. But we are talking about solo mums, and I can't see how you're going to get rid of solo mums in a hurry. We are talking also talking about people who had their incomes cut by 25% in 1991, and in spite of the fact that we had 9 years of Labour government, those cuts have never been restored.
That's right.
And the gradual opening up of the distance between those in work and those now on benefits, and how on earth you live on the meagre benefits that people are paid. I mean, there are some cases, Cameron, where throwing more money at a situation is exactly what you should do.
Okay, prediction for the election. What's your call?
My prediction is that Labour, unless they can get a very simple message, they're going to be doomed. They're going to, Phil Goff especially, unless they, basically look at the Australian situation. Labor can either take the Abbott approach and become a robust opposition and have a very simple message and hammer the government on that simple message, which is, are you any better off than you were under Labor?
Yeah, it's a good line.
Or they can take the Turnbull approach, right, which was to debate on policy in deep minutiae, which Labor loves to do. Their policy
you're right.
And if they don't change the game, if they don't get Phil Goff to change the game, or get a new leader that will change the game, then Phil Goff is going to be challenging Bill English for the worst opposition leader ever award.
Right. Well, here's my prediction. The first prediction is that it will be one of the toughest fights we've seen. The news media will be almost to a person in the government's corner.
Yep.
Nevertheless,
with the exception of you, Chris.
Winston will crest the 5% threshold and may do far better than many people expect. Yep. This, I think, will make it impossible for National to pull.
He's a doddery old
to pull a government together. The pressure will come then on the Greens, and the pressure will come on the Maori Party.
Yep.
I would predict serious internal strife in both.
Yep.
And I think that the reasoning of the National Party in 2008 was absolutely right. If Winston's there, we're not.
Yep.
And I believe that if Winston is there, the Labour Party will, in the end, be forced to form a government because National will not be able to.
I mean, Bomber's favourite thing is to talk about the new left-wing party, and I think that'd be fabulous because that'll take an extra 5% off Labour. They'll probably get about 4% ultimately and keep it, and then that support will have bled away from Labour, and that'll be the end of them.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Cam. To my final prediction, if the economy continues to collapse, and we really are facing a unique economic 1929 crisis, then the environment is set for a splintering of the political spectrum. A new right party under Muriel Newman, John Banks and Don Brash could face a new left-wing party with Hone, Sue Bradford and Matt McCartan. Using Hone's electorate seat, the left could still get representation sub 5% threshold. Those crucial extra seats could be the difference between being the new government and not being the new government. One thing is for certain, the 2011 election will be much, much, much closer than the right wing are currently pretending, and the manufactured crisis of the Hobbit tells us the next election will be the most bitter and divisive election we will have ever seen in modern politics. Before the fight begins, let us all take a moment to celebrate the fact that no matter how nasty the election gets, we are one of the few lucky countries in the world where political power can be handed over or maintained by peaceful means, in a country where the people's will can be genuinely expressed. Beyond political allegiances, we can all count our blessings to live in such a strong democracy. That's the show for 2010. Join us for our next show, January the 20th, as we start the 2011 election year. That leaves me to thank all the participants this year: Cameron Slater, Chris Trotter, Penny Holst, Tim Selwyn, Phoebe Fletcher, David Slack, Efeso Collins, Stephen Oates, Selwyn Manning, Claudette Hoiti, Peter Tashkoff and David Shearer. Thanks also to Debs, our director, and Tom, our editor. Triangle TV and New Zealand On Air. If you like this year's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens. Thanks for watching whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand On Air.